The Speaker of Canada's House of Commons has resigned from his position after inviting a Ukrainian Nazi veteran to speak before the Parliament, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and President Volodymyr Zelensky. Let's watch some of his resignation speech.
I must step down as your Speaker. I reiterate my profound regret for my error in recognizing an individual in the House during the joint address to Parliament of President Zelensky. That public recognition has caused pain to individuals and communities, including the Jewish community in Canada and around the world, in addition to survivors of Nazi atrocities in Poland, among other nations. I accept full responsibility for my actions. My resignation is effective at the end of the sitting day tomorrow, Wednesday, September 27th, to allow preparations for the election of a new Speaker.
Meanwhile, over on Capitol Hill, the Gray Zone pressed self-proclaimed anti-fascist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the Nazi mishap.
I catch you at the late night on the same topic?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Quick comment for the Gray Zone. Were you concerned last week when President Zelensky in Ukraine gave a standing ovation for an ex-Nazi war veteran in Canada?
Well, I mean, I think any situation like that is of note and goes.
It is concerning.
Thank you.
Now, people on the left and the right alike are skewering AOC, I would say kind of the far left. I don't mean that as a critique, but people who have been critical of the squad for a while now. I've been skewering this clip, alleging that she intentionally kind of trailed off her answer or didn't declaratively disavow what happened in a way that is contradictory to her stated values as an anti-fascist. Do you think that's a fair characterization?
I mean, I think when somebody asks you as an elected official a question about Nazis, it's important to be very clear and direct in disavowing that. I think she probably could have, well, she definitely could have been more clear about it and could have been more forceful with her response. But like most members of Congress, she's always in a rush and generally trying to avoid cameras that she hasn't set up ahead of time. I do think that when you're AOC, you'd think you and your comms team would take steps to prevent these sort of situations from bubbling up consistently. But of course, in this case, she again did not take those steps. And now you've got a lot of people asking, why would she not forcefully condemn this?
Yeah, I mean, the Gray Zone does some good capital steps, gumshoe reporting like this, and have gotten some progressives in particular on the record on things in a really instructive and useful way, because unfortunately a lot of the progressive media does seem to be more interested in just gilding the lily of the elected progressives bona fides instead of actually challenging them and pushing them to do what they pledged to do for poor and working people when they got into office. This instance, I'm a little on the fence. It does seem to me, you can hear the reporter at the end parrot back the word concerning. He asked the question, is it concerning? She says something that she says that any situation like this is of course, and then it fades out, and then you heard her say concerning, and then the reporter says, yes, it is concerning, which suggests to me that she did say something along the lines of, yes, any situation like this is concerning.
Yeah, but isn't it also maybe more than concerning?
Sure, but when you're asked a question, it is not unusual to use the framing that you're given. Sure. And in fact, one of the bits of advice they give you in interviews is to not fall for that, because I could ask you a leading question and get you to admit to something you don't want to. But it is a natural, you're given that speech advice because it is a natural human response that if I ask you, Spencer, what do you like to wear on Sundays? You would say, I like to wear pajamas on Sundays or whatever. I mean, that is a normal linguistic trait.
Yeah.
Going back to the question of what happened to this Ukrainian leader of the House of Commons, it did seem like the responsibility was broader than just him. So he introduced the guy. He's the one that referred to him as a hero. So there's obvious reasons why the spotlight is on him. But it seems unlikely that the decision-making that led to this man being honored fell squarely on his shoulders. Is this one of those situations where someone's head has to roll, so it's his, but does that then mean that there's not a real inquiry into getting to the root of what's been going on here?
Well, I think there's a lot of questions. It's nice to see somebody take responsibility for something. Sure. But again, like you said, this House of Commons Speaker was probably not the one who may have been, but probably was not the one who had the idea to invite him, to bring him, to honor him, to give him a standing ovation. I think it will be interesting to find out whose decision that was, if it was within parliament, if it was on the part of Zelensky, if it was on the part of the Ukrainian government. You could assume maybe that the Canadian government didn't know his full military record, for lack of a better term. But presumably the Ukrainian government did know exactly what his background was and
Why do you say that?
he had fought for. Well, it's his country. If he's a Ukrainian Nazi veteran, the Ukrainians should theoretically, I get they're at war.
Well,
I get they're at war,
are they
and their
responsible for
records.
vetting someone that the Canadian Parliament? I'm just moving
Yes,
this.
no, correct. And
Was
so,
he chosen by Zelensky or was he chosen by the Canadian Parliament?
and that's the question that I think we still need to get to the bottom of, because that will raise more questions then, because if it was Canada's decision to invite him and they just did not know, because presumably he's not running around necessarily priding himself on the fact that he's a Nazi veteran. I'm guessing he didn't show up in full regalia. But if it was Zelensky's decision, if he said, hey, we have this veteran I would love to bring along for your lawmakers to meet, and he did know that, or there are records about his background, then that raises a lot more questions about why Ukraine is choosing this person specifically to represent all of their veterans.
Yeah, that is the question, honestly. I don't care so much about Anthony Rota as I do about the decision-making that led to this point. And I think that is a really interesting question. Were a list of veterans provided?
Right.
And who put together that list and what kind of vetting was done? Those are the people who, if anyone deserves to lose their job, should lose their job.
Yes.
Also, it's worth noting, it doesn't seem like Anthony Rota has lost his job. He's resigned as Speaker of the House of Commons. But just because you're no longer Speaker doesn't mean that you're not still in the House of Commons. This reminds me of a situation that happened, I think it was just last year, where there was a recorded call that was leaked from the LA City Council in which council members were referring in racist terms to other city council members. And the main culprit in question, Nuri Martinez, she ended up resigning as head of the city council, and everyone was like, oh, great, accountability. And then you read a little more closely, and you're like, oh, no, she's just fully on the city council, still fully making decisions with all of the biases that were on display, but she gave up her leadership position, and everyone just assumed that was enough. So this does feel a little bit like face saving, if you look at it that way, on the part of the Canadian Parliament. I'm not saying that this individual, if he wasn't the one that was responsible for choosing this guy, needs to be kicked out of government. But it is interesting that the focus is now on him and not on how we got to a place where a full-blown former Nazi was being applauded as a hero in front of Parliament.
And did he travel there with Zelensky? How again, if it was the Ukrainian government's decision, presumably they invited him and they were like, hey, we're going to Canada. We would love for you to join us to represent Ukrainians' brave warfighters. And maybe flew on the plane. And again, who in that government did not know who picked this person? Who, just if you have a bunch of Nazi veterans, you would assume that you would know who they are in your military, because there would be the military records. Again, Ukraine is at war. A lot of stuff is not normal there. But you would think that when your cause is as important in Zelensky's eyes as Ukraine's is, and people always talk about how powerful he is going to countries of the world and speaking before these global bodies and these governments about how much money he needs and how much support he needs and how much it means, you would expect that you would do your due diligence to make sure the people that you're bringing along as, for lack of a better term, a prop to show sort of the bravery of your people and the resolve that they have, you would not choose someone whose resolve was as a Nazi.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to beat a dead horse. But it's not like you were having an agricultural festival and you were rewarding the guy who grew the biggest pig or the largest pumpkin or whatever, and he happened to have had a dark past. The whole point of honoring this guy was to honor his service. And so not to ask the question, what kind of service, or interrogate whether his service was even honorable, seems to be... I'm not saying it's more than an oversight. I can't prove that it was more than an oversight. I can't prove that it was intentional. But you can understand why people are so gobsmacked by this.
Yes, absolutely. Because again, and in the United States, especially in Canada, likewise, many countries, honoring people who are veterans is one of the most important things that those people and those societies do, because these are the people that have given so much, sacrificed, lost so much in order for the rest of us to have the lives that we have and the opportunities that we have, to bestow that same honor. And again, you have all of the Canadian House of Commons standing on their feet clapping. That makes all of them look silly, because again, there they all are clapping for the service of someone. And like you said, why would you do that if you don't know what the service? Serving who?
It does
Serving
point
what?
to the transparency of these kinds of moments. Also, I'm sorry, the man is 98 years old. And you're not just going to do a little bit of math and count back to at least what war we're talking about, what service, And then at that point, I said this to someone in the control room after we wrapped yesterday. I was like, if I were, let's say, living in the 1970s when we still had Civil War veterans, and someone was like, hey, Briahna, want to meet a Civil War veteran? You bet your bottom dollar. My first question is, which side?
No, that's a great point. And again, to your point, someone would think to ask these questions and double check these things. And yet, it seems as though no one did. And now there's this just absolute mess.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll do it for us today, folks, here on Rising. Spencer, it's been lovely sharing the desk with you today.
It was so great being here. Thank you.
And we'll be back next week. I'll be here with Amber Appy tomorrow and back with Shermichael on Monday. So be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while you're on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Bye-bye.